What would you say that Eric should advise his caucus and his candidates to talk about in the next election?
Well, there's a fundamental previous decision you have to make. The question right now is, does the Republican Party need to motivate its coalition or modify its coalition? Now, you always have to motivate your coalition when you're going to an election. That's necessary. You can't get rid of it and start over. The question is whether they need to modify it in some significant ways. I think there are good reasons they need to. Demographic change, generational change, the problems with working class voters. That, for me, requires a governing vision that includes everyone. Okay? That it does outreach to even people you know aren't going to vote for you. Because it shows you care about the whole. You're not representing a faction within your own coalition. You're representing the country and its needs. It's the reason when we were involved in a campaign in 2000, when one of the president's first, candidate Bush's first speeches he gave, he specifically criticized the idea that politics has no higher purpose, no greater goal than leave us alone. That was a criticism that we made to prove this point.
That's a criticism you snuck into the speech. We could have been a little bit more artful in that one speech, making our point.
Right. But so governing vision matters. But then the Republican Party has to overcome, I think, through symbolic policy, needs to communicate, we get it. We know there's a problem here. And the problem on immigration, just to be blunt about it, is not that Republicans have not done enough outreach in the last couple of decades. It is that an element of the party has set out to alienate, positively alienate the Hispanic community in Proposition 187 under Pete Wilson, in the Arizona law, in defeating the Bush comprehensive immigration reform, in talking about self-deportation. The message here, that requires some kind of shock therapy. It has to say, we understand that this has been on the wrong track. That's the reason that immigration reform, I think, is an important symbol for the Republican Party. It's not enough, because then you actually have to address people's real-world economic needs, and that's an entirely different set of issues. I would also say there are some other issues where you can communicate that this is, we're taking a different approach. I mean, in an essay that I did with Pete Wehner for commentary, we said, why don't you take on the concentration of power in the big banks or corporate welfare or other things to symbolize that you're not on the side of a corporate culture, that you're actually on the side of individual entrepreneurship and social mobility and other things. I think the Republican, I write on for Friday, for tomorrow, on an issue like prison reform, okay? And that is an interesting issue where libertarians are concerned about 2 million people in prison, okay, as vast mass incarceration. Evangelicals have a humanitarian concern through ministries and others with prisoners. Liberals are concerned about the racial implications. Why can't Republicans pick some issues like that show we're different, we're changing, perfectly within the bounds of our coalition, perfectly within the bounds of our ideology, but show the kind of creativity that says, we get it, we're shifting and changing. I'll just conclude by saying, parties win when they come to the point where you say, we're tired of losing, okay? Democrats did that in 1992 with Bill Clinton, where they gave their nominee the leeway to do unexpected outreach on welfare and crime and other issues in order to reposition his party and shift their coalition. Okay. Republicans did that with George W. Bush in 2000. They trusted him on the essentials, on tax policy and other things, and then they gave him the leeway with compassionate conservatism to talk about education, faith-based institutions, and other kinds of outreach. The question here is whether Republicans right now are in that place or whether they're going to have to take another loss in order to reach that place.